"You can't hide," he hissed. "I'm coming for you." Then he knocked again. January 2011. Latoya Ammons and her 3 young children moved into a small, nondescript house on Carolina Street. It was a fixer-upper for sure, but she had big plans for the home. She just needed some time, money, and elbow grease. Latoya thought she could make the house livable for her and her kids again. But little did she know she was about to find out her new home was anything but ordinary. At first, life was great. It was a little chilly, but nothing unusual for Indiana. Then strange things started to happen. One evening while watching TV, Latoya heard footsteps in the hallway. She assumed it was her son, Dakota, but when she checked, he was sitting right next to her on the couch watching TV. She dismissed it, assuming it was just her imagination. However, her daughter Kiara was not so quick to dismiss the sound. "I'm scared, Mama," she said, hugging her leg. "I heard it too." Latoya hugged her daughter reassuringly, telling her she was sure it was just a mouse or something. But deep down she couldn't help but wonder if maybe they weren't alone in the house. That same week, Latoya noticed strange shadows moving around the corner of her eye. Every time she tried to focus on them, they vanished. Things really started to pick up after the first snowstorm of the year. One afternoon, Latoya was doing bottles in the living room when she heard chains dragging metal moans. At first, she thought it was outside, but then she felt the floor vibrate beneath her feet. Something heavy was dragging itself closer and closer. When she finally found the source of the noise, she was shocked. Nothing was there. But those weren't the only sounds that sent shivers down her spine. She also started hearing what sounded like whispers and screams in the dead of night. And sometimes during the day, she'd smell something foul, like rotten eggs. As the weeks went by, things took a turn for the worse. One night, Latoya awoke to find her 9-year-old son standing at the foot of the bed. "I can't sleep," he whispered, his eyes wide and staring. "There's a man in the closet, and he wants to get me." Startled, Latoya sat up in bed. "Don't be silly, honey," she said, though she couldn't help but feel a chill crawl up her spine. But when she looked inside the closet, she didn't see anyone. Reassured, she told her son to go back to bed. But he shook his head. "No, he'll get me," he insisted. "Let's move." So Latoya did the only reasonable thing she could think of. She picked up her son and her 2 daughters, and they spent the rest of the night sleeping in the living room. The next morning after, of course, her son had fallen back asleep, Latoya decided she couldn't take it anymore. She needed to get to the bottom of this, so she called a priest. When Father Edwin Maginot arrived, he performed a blessing around the house and blessed each room. He even sprinkled holy water in the closet where the boy claimed the man was hiding. "It's safe, sweetie," Latoya told her son. "The bad stuff isn't here anymore." And for a moment, her son seemed reassured. But as soon as the priest left, he started crying again. That's when Latoya knew something sinister was happening in her home. So she called the police. But even before the officers stepped inside, they felt something was wrong. As soon as they walked through the front door, their equipment started to malfunction. Their flashlights flickered and died. Even their body cameras stopped working. "This is ridiculous," one of the officers said. But others couldn't help but feel uneasy. After all, they had been responding to reports of a monster in the closet. They searched the house thoroughly, but didn't find anything or anyone. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we couldn't find anything," the officer said apologetically. "If you're sure your son is okay, I guess we should be going." And as they walked toward the door, the officer heard something. A voice seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. "Get out," it whispered. "Get out now." The officer froze, spinning around to face the source of the voice, but he saw nothing. Was it the stress getting to him? Was he losing his mind? Back in the living room, Latoya watched the officers leave. She had a feeling they wouldn't be staying long. She sighed and sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Her son nuzzled against her leg, whimpering softly. She hugged him close, wishing she could take away his fear. She knew something was wrong, terribly wrong, but she never expected what came next. As the days passed, things got worse. The whispers became screams. Latoya started seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision, and she often smelled the stench of decay. But perhaps the most disturbing was the changes in her children. She noticed they often stared blankly into space, their eyes devoid of emotion. Sometimes they talked in strange voices, and other times she saw them walk backward up the wall to the ceiling. Latoya knew something evil had invaded her home. She reached out to Father Maginot for help. He returned, along with 2 other priests, and together they performed an exorcism. During the ceremony, Latoya watched in horror as her children writhed on the floor, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways. The priests shouted commands in Latin, trying to banish the demons that had taken over her children's bodies. But it was a losing battle. The longer the ceremony went on, the more savage the children became. Suddenly, the eldest son, Dakota, lunged forward, knocking the cross out of Father Maginot's hand. The priest stumbled back, knocking over an altar boy kneeling before him. Screaming in Latin, the possessed boy sprang forward, knocking the other priests off their chairs. "They need more help," Latoya cried out, watching in terror as the boy approached her, his eyes glowing red in the dim light of the candles. "Please, someone help us." Father Maginot knew she was right. He wasn't trained to handle this level of possession. This was beyond his pay grade. He quickly called for backup. The next day, a full team of priests showed up. This time they were prepared. Together, they performed several exorcisms over the course of many hours, but even they seemed overwhelmed. "We have never seen anything like this," one of the priests said in a rare moment of calm. "Whatever is inside these children is powerful, very powerful." And as if to prove his point, a crash echoed through the house, followed by maniacal laughter. "It's so strong," Father Maginot said, his voice trembling slightly. "I can't reach them." After another hour or so, the priests agreed they needed a break. They hadn't made much progress and feared they might lose the children completely. "We need more power," one of the priests said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We need to call the bishop." Before leaving, the priests tied the children to their beds, believing that would prevent them from harming themselves or anyone else. But when they returned, they realized they had made a grave mistake. The house had changed. The wallpaper was peeling away from the walls, and grotesque images seemed to form from the patterns. Books flew off shelves, pictures fell off the walls, and the furniture was overturned. But that wasn't the worst of it. The children were gone. The sheets were ripped from the beds, the windows were shattered, and a thick, sickly sweet odor pervaded the air. The priests quickly divided into teams to search the house and the surrounding area, but there was no sign of the children. Meanwhile, Latoya was frantic with worry. She paced the floor, praying that her children would return safely. But as the hours passed, her hope began to dwindle. Just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, she heard a knock at the door. Startled, she crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. To her shock, standing on her porch were her 3 children, but they weren't alone. His skin was pale and stretched tightly over his bones, and his teeth were long and sharp like fangs. "What do you want?" Latoya whispered, her voice shaking. The man leaned closer to the camera, and she could have sworn he smiled. "You can't hide," he hissed. "I'm coming for you." Then he knocked again. Latoya screamed and stumbled back. Father Maginot rushed to the house as fast as he could, but when he arrived, the children and the stranger were gone. All that remained was a faint, sulfurous odor. Latoya packed what little belongings she could carry and fled the house. She never looked back. To this day, Father Maginot has never forgotten the terror in the woman's eyes when he arrived. He has never seen anything like it before or since. Today the house stands abandoned, The local church demolished it after the incident. Now an empty lot remains where the house once stood, but locals swear they hear the faint sound of screams and chains dragging in the night. And some say, if you look closely into the shadows, you can see the gaunt figure of a man with glowing red eyes watching you.